So even on Christian presuppositions, one may object to the teleological argument. For to say that the world looks like something designed is to state an analogy between the world and objects designed by human beings. That's, if we find a painting in the woods and no one is around to paint it, was there an artist? Well, we know that that's always the case because we are the ones that paint it. And so how can we look at then a rock and say, well, this rock had to be here because do you see any rock makers around? And then we point to God. But Frame says we are not interested in showing that the world was made by human beings. We want to show that it was made by the one who radically transcends human beings. A perfect analogy between the world and objects of the human design would actually be counterproductive to Christian apologetics. Oh no, right. Let's get away with, get rid of the teleological, right? Maybe.
Right. So notice the teleological argument says, hey, look, let's look at this analogy between human productions and the world. And they seem to be similar. And therefore, we know that the world was, or at least we can, infer that the world was designed. Well, the point here that Frame is making is there's some problems with that. And so that's a good thing because we're not trying to argue that the world was designed by humans.
Right.
And so, yes, there's going to be some differences between the design of the world, the purposes, how it looks and that sort of thing, and human productions. That's what we would expect if it wasn't designed by humans, right? So he says some of humans' objections are actually productive. If the world is designed and made by God, then we would expect both analogy and disanalogy between the world and the products of human design, right? So we wouldn't expect it to fit exactly like we would suggest with human design because it's not made by humans, right? So in a Christian view, he says the world is something like an object of human design, something like it because it is designed, but it's also unlike such objects because it's a product of divine design, right? And thus this teleology actually favors the human or the Christian conclusion. Even the existence of evil can be listed among the evidences of Christianity.
Right.
So even the problems that you see in the design argument, he says, is can actually favor the Christian conclusion because we're not saying it was designed by people, right? Human designs. We're saying it gives its evidence of a designer, but different than human, therefore God.
So he says we can make the teleological argument equivalent to the epistemological argument that we considered earlier. The two arguments share the teleological intuition. Like the teleological argument, the epistemological argument begins with the observation that the universe is a rational order and accessible to the human mind. In both cases, this fundamental point is the same. Still, there is one advantage that the epistemological formulation has, and it is built on the premise that truth and rationality are moral values. Thus, the epistemological argument was reduced in turn to the moral argument, and the two arguments yielded the same theistic conclusion.
So they're similar, and he tries to say that they're really similar, but the epistemological argument obviously gets us closer because of the moral aspects of that.
And then you can argue into the moral arguments that we talked about in the last couple episodes.
And then we get into this distinction between personal and impersonal, and then we go from there.
Mm-hmm.